Szanowni Państwo, skoro już o technologii mowa, mam przyjemność zapowiedzieć naszego kolejnego prelegenta, który opowie nam o wszechobecnej w jego życiu technologii, o byciu always on i wszelkich związanych z tym konsekwencjach. Please welcome on stage author of the book Don't Unplug, Dancy.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I told them, I said, if you play Michael Jackson, I'll come out and dance if you have smoke. Because, you know, when you have that much smoke, you need that, you know. How is everybody? So I am officially holding you from lunch, so I will try to be quick. So you've heard a lot about the future. We're going to take a moment and go to the past. So I'm known as the world's most connected person, but that often begs the question, what did you do that made you internet famous? Well, to put it simply, in 2008, I said, every single piece of information the computer knows about me, I'm going to collect and save and learn about who I am. But where do you start when you're trying to collect your entire life? Like, what would you even think about? So for me, I had to think about, well, where do I spend most of my time? Like, where do you guys spend most of your time today? For me, back then, it was social media. So MySpace, Facebook, stuff like that. But then the question comes, where do you store your entire life, right? Because for me, having to make sense of my life in 2008, like a lot of people today, was hard because I couldn't really see my behavior. So I chose my calendar. How many of you use a calendar for stuff? So my calendar became full of my behavior. In this case, this was showing me all the Facebook posts and social media posts I was doing at that time. But then I thought to myself, if I could save all of my social media, couldn't I save even more? Now remember, this was like 12 years ago almost. So I thought to myself, I'm going to create a way to start looking at more. So I thought to myself, next, I'm going to save all my entertainment. So whether that's streaming music, television I watched, books I read, anything that was digital got saved to my calendar. Then I thought, you know what, I can do better. I'm actually going to save any time I go online and post a nasty opinion about something. Because, you know, there are some people that go online and they complain about every single thing there is. So slowly but surely, my calendar started saving all this information about my life. And I noticed these patterns way back then that I didn't realize would become so important. So for example, if I put stuff on social media, my friends only commented and liked on the things that were bad for me. So if I was drunk or naked at a bar and like totally messed up, my friends loved it. But if I did something healthy, like went for a walk, they didn't like it so much. If I binge watched anything on television, the next 2 days, 2 full days after I binge watched something, I would get nothing done. I was absolutely not productive. I was unfocused. And finally, if I left a really bad review for someone online, I treated people in the physical world worse. So slowly but surely, as all this information from my life went into my calendar, I started understanding a lot more about what made me tick, which drove me to this idea, how much more could I start to collect about myself? So you have to remember, in 2008, I was 40 years old. I'm 51 now. I was 100 pounds heavier, which I think is about 50 kilos. I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. I drank 36 cans of Diet Coke every single, I love Diet Coke, by the way. I just love it. Really, you Diet Coke people know who you are. But I thought to myself, I could start to make myself better with all this information. So the next thing I thought to myself was, I am actually going to save more. So I started saying, how about when I create something for work or for myself and I put it online? I would call this content. How do I save that? What type of metrics would I save about that? What about work? Is there any way I can not feel so overwhelmed about all the work that I need to do, right? And the thing about work is we don't realize how much we work because we don't see work happening. So just having every single email you get at work and every single email you send right to your calendar shows you that you never stop working. Even when you're sleeping, your company's sending you work. And then finally, money. What about all the money you spend, where you spend it, how you spend it, who you spend it on? Usually when people think about cataloging or collecting their life, they think about something like money. That's usually where a lot of young people start today. So my Google Calendar got Crazy, so crazy that I had to start to color code it. And the color coding actually allowed me to come in and see my day very easily. So reds and oranges and yellows on the calendar were days that were not the healthiest, and blues and purples and things were days that were a little bit better. But a bigger problem happened in 2010, and it was this thing. So I went from using my computer a lot to using a mobile phone a lot. And mobile phones are not really structured, and they're not searchable. If I asked one of you guys to say, pull out your phone and show me where you were 2 weeks ago, you'd be like, well, I don't know, I'd maybe check my email, maybe check Facebook. It doesn't make it simple to find yourself in a phone. So what I wanted to do was pull everything out of my phone. So the first thing I did was I went in and I took a screenshot of every single application and what that application knew about me in my life. And I put it into these categories. After I had all of this in screenshots, I thought to myself, there's kind of a system to how I use my phone. I kind of use my phone really good sometimes and really bad sometimes. And maybe this data and how I spend my time could be something I could look at. So I wanted to find a way to frame how I spent my time on my phone. So I took all of these apps and I went online and I started searching for a framework for how you spend your time. And of course, I found one. Abraham Maslow had something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And basically, it was an ordered way of looking at your life that some things needed to be taken care of before others. The problem was this. If I were to look at my apps for that exact same time, there were times when I was using all of my time at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all the things that were really not about securing my life. And there were other times where I was just spending all my time at the bottom. The real clue was coming and finding something right in the middle. So with all of this, I thought to myself, I'm going to create my first hack on my life. So what I did was I said, when I come home on a Friday night, I want to be able to keep track of when I go to the bar, and if I spend too much time at the bar, get an alert. So sure enough, I came home, I went to the bar, and the minute I went to the bar and I stayed at the bar too long, my system sent me a note saying, go home. Now, we've all had that friend or that person that tells us, you've had too much to drink, go home. But now my computer was watching me at the bar do this. So if I stayed longer, my system would then message the bartender and tell her to cut me off. And if she didn't cut me off, my phone would then grab pictures from my camera roll and send them to my friends and family saying, Chris is at the bar and he's drunk, go get him. And then the last step was I used a geofenced credit card by a company called Simple, and if I still sit at the bar later, my credit card got cut off. So what was really crazy was slowly but surely, the habits that made up my bad habits started taking over and making my life really, really different. Now, in 2012, I got to the part of my life that most people think about when you think about tracking: health, food, sleep, environment, how loud is it, how bright it is. And then finally, travel. I sometimes joke around and say, if you think you're healthy, get in an airplane and go 5 hours in any direction, and you'll see how unhealthy you are, because travel is so difficult. My calendar went from being super, super color-coded to now being actionable because of things like the bar hack. So I wanted to see what other actions I could make in my life. So if you figured anything out about me, I get in trouble with work a lot. I'm always going to HR. I'm constantly getting fired. Nothing ever works out for someone like me because I say things I don't mean. The problem with this was I didn't know how it happened. How do I get in trouble at work so much all the time? So what I learned was there's a pattern. I usually will start to talk louder, then I'll talk faster, then I'll say something that gets me sent to HR. Anybody ever been to HR? Where am I? Yeah, some of you. I see you shaking your heads. If it's not you, you know who I'm talking about. So for me, I wanted to create a system to catch me when I was about to get in trouble. So what I did was if I was in my office and I was speaking a normal tone, this sensor called a NetAtmo would watch me. And as long as I was below 74 decibels, everything was fine. But the minute I went up by 1 decibel, the lights in my office would dim. And all of a sudden, I'd know, okay, I'm getting angry and I'm going to get in trouble. Slowly but surely, no one would ever notice because it's just imperceptible, 1 decibel and the lights in my office. But slowly but surely, little tweaks like this changed how I spoke and how I treated the world, which was really phenomenal. we can move on from there. We've looked at health. We've looked at environment. We're kind of get into kind of this next area. You know, by 2015, I was really suffering from what I would call data PTSD. You can only measure and monitor and collect information about your life so much. How many of you have ever used Facebook and you get that message on this day and you can see 1 year ago? Like sometimes we don't want to see those messages because those memories are painful or they're things we don't want to really think about at that moment. But when you measured as much as I did, suddenly those on this day messages are crazy profound. And you start to realize, do I have any autonomy, or is like my life just a big cycle? Am I doing the same thing over and over and over again? So I got into what I call the wisdom phase. By the way, is this interesting? Do you guys, is this making sense? All right. So the wisdom phase was really about kind of things that are harder to measure, but we don't really talk about: spirituality, self-love, and then obviously love. Can you find someone? I'd been single my entire life. And the tools in my life had become much broader, as they're much broader for you guys today. We went from measuring simple health to measuring habits on our devices to measuring entire ecosystems of behavior that people monitor and collect today. I moved from a Google Calendar and went to this system that I now use. You can check it out online on my website. But it broke my information down, made it really easy. I could start sharing it with my doctor, with my families. And I thought to myself, this is crazy. I'm finally getting a hold of all this information. It's really easy for me to understand. I want to start changing the way I feel about the world. So if I'm feeling depressed, or I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling sad, I want to create a way that this data can start to help me. So what I did was I went back and I looked at all the different kind of big important points in my life up until that point and what the data was that made them up. How was I feeling? How late had I slept? Had I eaten? What had I eaten? And I came up with some fundamental things that made life really amazing. So I thought to myself, I'm going to take these and I'm going to create a downloadable habit that would actually play when I'm feeling anxious or depressed or scared. So what I did was I mined all of the data from my trip to Disney World. I love Disney World. It's like China, but safer, and the surveillance you pay extra for. So I went to Disney and grabbed some of my favorite pictures and mapped those pictures and the lighting in those pictures to the smart lighting in my house. So slowly, if I was anxious, the lighting became really, really soft, and you really didn't notice it. It was just enough to go, oh, the lights, the house is kind of feeling good. And then finally, all the music that I heard, because of course your phone's listening to everything, all the passive music that I listened to would then get turned into playlists, and these playlists would slowly start to come on. You'd say, oh, it's the Disney thing. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm starting to feel a little bit better. And then finally, if I still wasn't feeling too good and anxious, the house environmental systems would come on, which of course changed the temperature. I had little diffusers that would play smells. And of course, people were visiting my house at any point would go, what the hell is going on here? You know, I could smell popcorn in the light. I'm like, just trust me, I'm trying to relax. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? All right. And then finally, if I ignored all of that, there was a system that automatically ordered food, some of my favorite foods that I ate at Disney. So slowly but surely, I went from someone who was manipulating my behavior using my phone to someone who was manipulating my behavior using my voice to someone who was manipulating my mood using all the information I collected from the past that made me happy. And this leads us to this very powerful concept of what does the world look like in the future? And we have to kind of look at the last 2 years. Well, by 2016, I had changed enough and become, I guess, calm enough that I finally met someone and I finally got married. And where did I get married? Disney World, right? And it's pretty cool to get married at Disney World. Now, you won't be able to afford a house or food, but you can get married at Disney World. And from there, I went ahead and all of my information started getting published. Of course, people knew about me by 2016. A lot of people were watching my life. And I started learning to myself there's a big difference between capturing data about yourself and capturing feelings about yourself. So I went from someone who really was known for doing what I would call the quantified self, it's a movement in the world, to someone who really focused on collecting information about my qualitative self, what made me happy. Because once you get married and you find someone you love, how you measure becomes different. Ask anybody who's had a baby. So I started to learn that I only wanted to track what I valued. So I started using applications that were like some of the original ones I did, but I put in categories like love or intimacy or friendship. So every month, if I hadn't spent time with my friends or doing things with my partner, I would get updates saying, you're 3% below love this month. And I knew right away, okay, I need to focus on what makes me happy. Now, these are not radical life hacks like the ones I developed over the last 10 years. This is simple stuff. Apple calls it screen time, right? But I think if you were to think about your life through what you value and what you love, you'd start to measure and look at your life a little bit different. So much so that I replaced all the batteries on my Mac with this timer that shows me how much of my life I've spent. So I don't actually see how much battery I have. I see how much. I'm 59. Actually, today, I'm 61% through my life. And that kind of reminds you that, okay, time is going away. And also, all the apps on my phone and my watch now watch me and tell me if I'm taking or adding minutes to my life. And what's really amazing about this is if someone's really pissing you off, and you feel yourself getting upset, you get an alert that they're killing you. And you can just go, see, you're killing me. You are killing me. And it really helps kind of exemplify kind of the future we go in where people are looking at this very provocative world. Because I think right now it's become so easy to talk about why technology is bad and not talk about why technology is good. And I see a lot of older people who judge and blame, like, get off your phone. I'm like, you can't. We live in a world where you're required to love and work and eat and get transportation is in your phone. Telling someone to get off their phone is like saying stop breathing. Yet we're mean to each other about how we expect other people to use their phones. So now that we've talked about my past 10 years, I'd like to talk about your next 10. Because out of everyone you've spoken to, I think I'm uniquely qualified to say, watch what's coming. So the first thing I want to talk about is this concept of what I am and what you are, even though you might not know it yet. And that's the word cyborg. You guys are cyborgs. This is nothing scary. It doesn't mean biorobotic. It doesn't mean that you're a monster or a machine. It just means that there's some piece of technology that augments the way you behave, like a GPS or eyeglasses, that makes life easier. That's all cyborg means. It's none of these other crazy things. And we're not the only animal that is cybernetic. I mean, there are pictures of monkeys that learn to use spears to fish. And even if you give a chimpanzee a phone, they literally will search Instagram and find other chimpanzee pictures. It's normal to be cybernetic. It's just where we are as a species. But too many people are studying people, and they're not studying cyborgs. Because how you behave as a group of people, in your opinion, changes. My friend Amber Case did a TED Talk in 2010. She's my cyborg godmother. And she talks a lot about cyborgism in her talk. And she talks about how it's really about restored functionality. But the thing I really like about this is you require feedback. So many people today, when you text them, if they don't hear from you in a second, they go, are you there? Are you there? Right? Or you see this like ... like are they typing or are they just trying to freak me out? Right? This dependence on feedback is ridiculously strong. And all I'm saying is you could use that same cybernetic skill to become thinner, richer, happier, more loving, more kind, right? So cyborgism has these positive traits that right now are only expressing themselves in the media. I don't think it's real, as some darker ones. But if we go back further to 1958, this guy named J.D. Linklater had this idea that if you could plug a man and a machine together, we could solve some of the problems with latency if there were a nuclear war. Now, today, if you watch any of the crazy stuff Elon Musk talks about, you'll see this kind of man-machine interface is very real. But these are not new ideas. These are old ideas of what the problems they were trying to solve. This is someone named Douglas Engelbart. In 1968, the year I was born, he created this system where he used something that looked like a mouse and something that looked like what we would call the internet, and he talked to it. And he talked about how in the future we would become dependent on this information stream. Kind of what I think is the father of modern cyborgism is this guy named Stephen Mann. In 1981, that's a long time ago, he strapped a camera to his head and all of this technology on his body. A lot of what I did to myself, I borrowed from these ideas of Stephen Mann. And the first thing he realized was if he could go outside with technology on his body, he wouldn't augment reality, he wouldn't virtualize reality, he would diminish it. And I think this is provocative because what I did at home with downloading memories and making myself feel like I'm at Disneyland, he removed all the street signs. So all he saw were messages from his wife and his spouse. Or Neil Haberson, who was born colorblind, and he created a device so he could hear sounds. Or Rob Spence, who's a really good friend of mine, he lost his eye in a hunting accident, so he created a camera that he keeps in his eye so everything he sees is recorded. Now, these are extreme cases of cyborgism, but they're really no different than what we're seeing in the world today. If we think about what I did from 2014 and all the sensors on my body, or even if you go to Sweden today, where many people pay for their train and open their doors with devices embedded in their bodies. Now, a lot of people have asked me, Chris, do you have things in and under your skin? And the answer is no. Because I have a very simple rule for my cyborgism, and that is technology can be good or technology can be easy, but it can't be both. It can be good or it can be easy, but it can't be both. And a lot of people, when they get caught up around technology making them feel bad, they're using applications that are making life easy, not good. Life good is hard. Life easy happens very fast. So if your life seems like it's moving fast, look at some of the apps you're using. But if we look at kind of more modern cyborgs, I think this is so amazing. I love YouTube. So about 3 or 4 years ago, there was this whole kind of movement on YouTube of unboxing videos. And unboxing videos are so cybernetic, because if you think about it, you don't have to shop, you don't have to spend money, you don't even have to open the box. You can watch someone do all of it and have all the same feelings. About a year or two after that, we got esports. Esports became massive. And this is really telling that we now can watch someone play a game instead of playing it. It's kind of like what our parents did with traditional sports, but now young people are literally watching the biometrics. How high did that person's heart rate get while they were playing? But my absolute favorite cybernetic trend for everyday cyborgs is this: reaction videos. Do you have reaction videos in Poland? So basically, we now watch people watching people have reactions, right? It's so mind-blowing that we now are so removed from ourselves that it's easier to kind of outsource our emotions. So the idea of downloading feelings and downloading emotions is not as far-fetched as it seems. It's happening now. We're just not looking at it through the lens of cyborgism. And something that I heard the speaker before me talk about was this idea of the interface. We're rapidly moving toward a world where we don't have any screens. I know it seems impossible to think about because all you do is see people looking at screens, but we are heading toward a world when screens don't exist anymore. If you just look at a shopping experience from Amazon, we went from clicking something on the internet to being able to have something delivered automatically, to being able to push a button and have someone show up, to being able to talk to it. Now we've got the Amazon Go store. I went to this. You walk in, pick up something, and walk out. We used to call that stealing. But today, that's a technological enhancement, right? And it's so crazy because you don't have to talk to anyone, right? You don't have to think about what you're spending. You have to think about what you're eating. So this idea of the interface removing itself currently, yes, it's convenient, but it's not good. And if we think about it, even Apple's doing this. Over the last 5, 6 years, we look at kind of the evolution of the Apple ecosystem. They're going to smaller and smaller to no screens. And the current iPods, which I got them all here in Warsaw, right? They're very, very small. Apple says you don't have to ever take them out except to charge them. So they're encouraging people to put technology in their body and leave it in there. There's this one chart I drew a while back that I show at every conference, and I think it's really telling. Because if you ever wonder why the world seems so overwhelming and so fast, it's because of this. When I was born, about that time, it took a lot to make a computer work to understand what it wanted from me. But slowly over my lifetime, the amount of effort between me and the computer, whether I was typing or touching or it was watching me move, or it was just around me and I was around it, slowly changed. And when you become immersed in technology, you don't have to be a machine. You are in the machine. And what people don't understand is when we thought about the future, we thought there'd be people who look like Rob Spence or people who look like Stephen Mann. But no, they're people that look like you and me. We are the machines, and we've learned to become symbiotic with the systems that we need to make life work and make life work really easy. This is why in the entire world right now, there's so much confusion about what people see on television, what they hear in real life, because this idea of reality is completely mixed. Is it an alternate reality? Is it fake news? Is it post-truth? It's all of those things because we're all living inside a different computer. And the next thing is this idea of habits. I was kind of an early adopter to changing habits, but currently habits are changing all of our behavior very, very rapidly. This started back in about 2014 when our devices would automatically change the display brightness so we wouldn't burn our eyes out in the middle of the night. And by 2015, our clocks and calendars had pre-built habits put into them so they would remind us, hey, it's time to go to sleep. I call this big mother, not big brother, right? All these devices trying to worry about us and take care of us. By 2016, if you were on your device and you went to search for something, it would suggest it to you. And if you got in your car, it would notice you were in your car and say, do you want me to drive you to this place? Now, this is easy, but what happens if the app that it's suggesting to you or the place that it's telling you to go to are not good? Maybe it's someone that you used to date that you shouldn't be seeing. Or maybe it's an app where someone you are afraid of spends a lot of time. But our devices automatically think they know what's good for us, so these kind of downloadable habits. By 2017, our phones were actually telling us not to text while we're driving, and our cars had completely built-in systems. So when we get into them, the car just became a big car case. So many people in the US today don't buy cars. They buy phone cases on wheels, and they won't buy a specific car if it doesn't integrate with their phone. And of course, by 2018, you had the screen time. Now, Apple allows you to come in and see how much time you're using in your apps. And I think it's just mind-blowing that people are using an app to understand how they use apps. I mean, I did this myself, so I understand why it's interesting to people. But listen, there are better ways than coming in here and putting a digital bracelet on you saying, don't use Facebook now, right? But I know so many people who've blocked all these apps out and like they judge me for like not going to the bar in 2012. Like, dude, if you can't control Facebook, that's different than not getting a drunk, okay? That's a whole different story. And then finally now we've got the Apple credit card. The Apple credit card will actually keep track of the money you spend. It'll put in categories and show you colors. And if you spend too much, it'll cut you off. Sound familiar? Just like I did. So finally, I want you guys to think about what your habits are now and what they look like in the future. Because slowly but surely, whether you realize it or not, the ability for you to make choices about your own life is changing. And it's not that you're being told to do something different. You've been conditioned to trust the ease of use. And it's really important. A lot of people I meet today are so sad, and they're so overwhelmed, and they're so tired, and everything in their life is beating them up, and they don't realize that they literally are on a GPS nightmare because of their phone. And that GPS is taking them to all these things they should be doing instead of focusing on what they want to be doing. Right? And it's a choice. It's a choice each one of us make with our devices. And that's why I always tell people, you don't need to unplug. Unplugging is not the answer, and it's impossible. Nobody in the future is unplugged. If anything, they're completely plugged in, and by the time you die, you'll be having machines all over you, right? So don't unplug. Learn to become okay. Put yourself in airplane mode. It's not hard. You can do it if you sit with yourself. Just put yourself, and don't be judgmental on people who are overly reliant on technology. It's not their fault. Love them even harder. So I've been asked, like, what are the things you'd want to convey if you can convey like 3 things from your entire life that you learned from this radical experiment of becoming really plugged? The first one is really simple. We don't get better by counting steps. We get better by taking them. So many people will try to measure their way out of a nightmare, and at some point you just got to move. The second thing is we don't download apps. We download habits. You need to start thinking about that. Every device, every application, everything in your life that's technical is a habit. It's tied to some behavior that you value or don't, but it's that simple. And then most importantly, we need to stop valuing our schedules and start scheduling our values. Everyone I know has weaponized time. Where are you? When are you coming? Why aren't you here? Or you make plans with someone and they blow you off, right? Time has become this crazy weapon. And what I want to do is encourage people to say, forget time and focus on what you value. If you focus on what you value, time slows down and you become happier and you don't feel a victim to your calendar. But I think if there's one thing I'd say to a crowd of people who understand kind of all of these connections, it's this. We don't know how to measure what we care about, so we care about what we measure. And this is both the most profound and most important thing we can do as we look forward to the next 10 years maybe. This is my first time in Poland. I got here 2 weeks ago. I've been walking all around the city to the gardens. I love the mall down here. I have so much fun. I'm going to be out doing iPhone palmistry where I don't open your apps. I just look at the home screen and tell you about your life. But thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for being kind to yourselves. I really appreciate it. Be well.